sequel to the resignation of the former head of the interim national government and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Chief Anas Shonekan, and my subsequent appointment as head of state and Commander-in-Chief, I have had extensive consultations within the Armed Forces hierarchy and other well-meaning Nigerians in a bid to find solutions to the various political, economic, and social problems which have engulfed our beloved country and which have made life most difficult to the ordinary citizens of this nation.
Abacha's firm grip on power meant that the coup was the most realistic, albeit also most risky option for replacing him. The faith of Obasanjo, Yar'Adua, Ali, Madueke, and other senior officers demonstrated the risk of opposing Abacha and that no one, no matter how highly placed, was untouchable in Abacha's Nigeria. Even senior officers were cowed into playing a cat-and-mouse game of camouflaging their opposition to Abacha beneath euphemisms and innuendo. The former Chief of Army Staff, Major General Chris Ali, claimed that on several separate occasions, senior officers approached him to complain obliquely about Abacha. Ali said that in the first quarter of 1994, the Director of Military Intelligence, Brigadier General Ahmed Abdullahi, jokingly suggested to him in a car that he should relieve Abacha of his position. Ali claims that another such incident occurred in July 1994 while he traveled in a car with Major General Tajuddin Olarenwaju en route to Maiduguri in the northeast. According to Ali, Olarenwaju complained about senior officers from the Core North and suggested that it would be easy to move troops against them and remove them. Ali simply nodded his head to demonstrate that he was listening but did not say a word in response. Ali was a wily former military intelligence officer and knew the rules and risk of the game. Careless chatter was dangerous and officers had been set up and executed in previous coup plots after being baited into grumbling about the government or gossiping about a coup. Ali said, "Whoever voiced the coup option met with my stony silence. It is extremely difficult to prove knowledge or intent without a recorded voice or third-party corroboration. If a suggestion is carried on wire, unless your voice utters a response, the recording is worthless." Ali also claimed that on 3 separate occasions, Dia told him that Abacha should be overthrown. According to Ali, on the 3rd occasion, Dia suggested that they should draw Major General Ishaya Bamayi into the plan since Bamayi was then commander of the strategic Lagos Garrison Command. During one of Bamayi's visits to Flagstaff House, the official residence of the Chief of Army Staff, Ali cryptically told him, "It would appear that the boys have hijacked the regime on a course not very clear to me." Bamayi wisely did not respond to the remark, but merely stared back at Ali, who quickly changed the topic of conversation. However, some others were not as circumspect as Ali. In August 1997, senior officers including Dia, Bamayi, Major General Patrick Aziza, and the Chief of Defense Intelligence, Air Vice Marshal Idi Musa, began discussing a list of 4 demands that anonymous junior military officers had allegedly drafted and sent to their seniors for onward transmission to Abacha. The 4-point demand, as the list became known, insisted that Abacha should renounce any plan to succeed himself by becoming a civilian president, that the October 1998 handover date to civilian rule should not be postponed, that the original draft of the 1995 constitution should be promulgated, and that political prisoners should be released. Bamayi assured Dia that all GOCs except that of 1 Mechanized Infantry Division in Kaduna, Major General Mukhtar, who was abroad, were aware of and endorsed the 4-point demand.
Can you tell the Commission who originated the 4-point demand? Do you know who?
My Lord, I'm very happy with this question.
We are coming to serious questions. Just answer the questions I asked.
No, because
Do you know the originator?
I don't know the originator.
Now, when did you become aware of the 4-point demand?
Thank you very much. That's what I'm trying to go through.
No, don't jump. Just listen to me. I will guide you properly.
Okay. 4-point demand was told to me by General Dia. Nobody else briefed me on anything except General Dia. And what he told me was that General Bamayi and other and others, that's under GOCs, came to him and told him a 4-point demand. And he said, what does that mean? Because I'm not in inner caucus, so I wouldn't know much of what is happening. But I know he was only relating what has happened before between himself and other GOCs and General Bamidi especially.
The senior officers decided to present the 4-point demand to Abacha. After this decision, some or all of them held several meetings in September, October, and December 1997 at Dia's Abuja office. At one of their meetings, Dia noticed that Abami's chest was bulging out. In December 1997, Dia also introduced the 4-point demand to the Minister of Works and Housing, Major General Abdulkarim Adisa, a Yoruba Muslim from Ilorin in Kwara State, and the Minister of Communications, Major General Tajuddin Olarinwaju, another Yoruba Muslim. Adisa and Olarinwaju were suspicious and hesitant about getting involved with the 4-point demand. Both were close supporters of Abacha. Adisa had been one of the most vocal advocates of Abacha's self-succession. However, both men reluctantly acquiesced as they did not want to break Yoruba ethnic solidarity with Dia, but only after Dia reassured them that Bami had informed him that all the GOCs supported the 4-point demand. Adisa may have been reassured when his friend, Director of Military Intelligence, Brigadier General Ibrahim Sabo, joined the group of senior officers supporting the 4-point demand. The GOC of 2 Mechanized Division in Ibadan, Major General Bashir Magashi, also came on board. The senior officers held further meetings at Olarinwaju's house at 5 Thompson Avenue, Ikoyi in Lagos, and at Adisa's home. The officers deliberated on how they would respond if Abacha rejected the 4-point demand. Dia suggested an approach that was akin to an intervention. He said, I suggested to Bami that he and the GOCs should confront Abacha with the demands of the junior officers and ask him to address them or stand the risk of being removed. Bami and the GOCs agreed it was not a bad idea at all. The discussions had quickly escalated from discussing the 4-point demand with Abacha to giving him an ultimatum, then ultimately to overthrowing him if he did not implement the demands. Compelling Abacha to accept anything would be an awesome challenge. However, Abacha made a move to talk to some of the conspirators before they were ready to talk to him. He invited Olarinwaju and Adisa for meetings at the presidential villa. Abacha asked both men whether they had any complaints about his leadership. Neither of them raised any objections. Adisa had planned to tell Abacha about the 4-point demand, but may have lost his nerve in the presence of his commander-in-chief. As Adisa prepared to leave after this meeting, Abacha asked him whether he had anything else he wished to disclose. Adisa departed without revealing anything, but as he reached the gate, he turned back and went to see Abacha again. Abacha asked him whether there was anything on his mind that he had forgotten to say, but Adisa left without disclosing anything of note.
What happened is I told you that, not that I was summoned, I requested to see former head of state. After people have been coming to me to tell me that the head of state had some news about my activity without coming to him. Then I made up my mind to go and tell him what I've been told.
And did you tell him, sir?
I didn't tell him because some questions I asked him I was not satisfied. I now put nation first. Then I refused to tell him.
You refused to tell him?
Yeah, I refused to tell him. Then on my way at the gate, as I said, he had to send for me again to find out whether I forgot.
To find out whether you forgot anything?
I forgot anything that, Karim, is that all what you have to tell? You have nothing else to tell me? And I say, no, I have nothing else to tell you.
Why didn't you tell him about the 4-point demand at this stage?
Frankly speaking, as I've told you, I was not satisfied. It's just like a teacher. When you do an examination and you don't answer properly, you get 0. So I was not satisfied with all the inquiries I found out from you. So I believe that I should put my nation before individuals.
Sir, will I be right in thinking that perhaps you wanted the 4-point demand to succeed? That was why you didn't tell him?
You are quite correct on that line, because I found out that anybody, the country was going astray. The country, we have no reputation again. We have so many things common. It's just, yes, General Abacha, as I've said, I can never deny him, I can never forget what he has done for me. But I found out that, later that the way and manner Nigeria is going, we may end up being nothing. And I cannot compromise the nation with an individual ambition.
The group set December 20th as the date for their confrontation with Abacha. Bamaye and Magashi met Dia at his house on that day. Bamaye claimed that Dia gave Magashi a speech to read and rehearse in preparation for announcing Abacha's displacement. He claimed Dia suggested that Magashi should read the speech because he, like Abacha, was from Kano and would be accepted in the north. However, Dia claimed that the speech was drafted in Olarenwaju's house in the presence of Bamaye and Aziza, and that the plan was that Bamaye would read the speech. Bamaye also averred that Dia reminded the group that General Abacha has a terminal illness and that when the old man goes, youth boys should not forget to maintain the hierarchy. That is, they should not forget that Dia was Abacha's deputy and should succeed him as head of state. Overnight on December 20th and 21st, armed soldiers were deployed at strategic locations, though they were not told why. Dia stayed up late that night. He had guests in his house and played drafts late into the night with his longtime friend Abiodun Okunga. Okunga went to bed sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. on the morning of December 21st. However, the night was still young. Al-Mustafa unexpectedly called Dia's residence on the presidential villa's intercom system. The call spooked Dia, who wondered why Al-Mustafa was not already under arrest, which was to be the signal for the confrontation. When he heard Al-Mustafa's voice, Dia panicked and dropped the receiver without saying anything. Al-Mustafa called Dia a second time but was instead transferred to the security gate at Dia's house. Al-Mustafa then decided to visit Dia in person. However, by the time he arrived, Dia had departed after a state security service operative named Issa Adebowale, who worked for Dia, persuaded him to leave immediately. Adebowale and Dia left together in the former's car and drove to his residence in the OAU quarters of Asokoro, Abuja. However, security officers somehow discovered Dia's destination, exchanged gunshots with the guards at Adebowale's house, entered the grounds, and led by Sergeant Jatau and a state security service operative named Abdurrahman, arrested Dia, who some say was hiding under a mattress. Similar scenes took place elsewhere. Soldiers from the Corps of Military Police besieged the house of Dia's staff and friends, such as his ADC, Major Kayode Kenshiro, his special political advisor, Professor Olufemi Odekunle, a professor of criminology at Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, Adisa and Olarenwaju, and arrested them at gunpoint. Both Kenshiro and Odekunle were badly beaten up and hit with gun butts as they were arrested. Something had gone wrong.
In the early hours of 21st December 1997, about 3:30 a.m., while my family was preparing to go on Christmas holidays, I was sleeping in my residence with my wife and children when I was suddenly and violently seized by unidentifiable security operatives sent by Major Hamza Al-Mustafa, the then Chief Security Officer to the leader of state, Sani Abacha. Within a few minutes of that horrible encounter, I was physically battered, I was bloodied, and brutally bundled into a vehicle in the middle of the hooded operatives and driven to Aso Rock, where another horde of such operatives, Major Mustafa, was holding court. As it were, it was from his and other violent questioning that I had the first inkling that my seizure had to do with some alleged role in some alleged coup d'etat.
With security officers in Abuja and Lagos conducting arrests, Al-Mustafa took the precaution of confining the Abacha family inside the presidential villa and barred any of them from leaving. The detainees were driven to the presidential villa, which despite the late hour was a beehive of activity. About 40 to 50 members of the strike force were milling around in the courtyard in front of Abacha's office. The detainees were brought to the strike force and their commander, Al-Mustafa. The atmosphere was hostile. When there is an attempt to overthrow a military government, everyone except the head of state becomes a suspect, and soldiers are under extreme pressure to demonstrate whose side they are on. Aggression is likely in such circumstances. Odekole claimed that as Al-Mustafa fired questions at him, strike force members beat him and taunted him and other detainees. Odekole also claimed that Abacha's ADC, Lieutenant Colonel Abdallah, told him, "We gave you a small opportunity to come and eat and better your life a little bit and see what you have done." After being roughed up, some of the senior detainees were brought to various rooms inside the presidential villa where Al-Mustafa interrogated them. Adisa was taken to a room he described as extra bright. However, Dia was the biggest fish arrested and special arrangements were made for him. His captors took him to Al-Mustafa's office where he met his co-conspirator Magashi, Musa, Bamei, and Sabo, before giving a one-on-one meeting with Al-Mustafa himself. Al-Mustafa tried the good cop routine and told Dia, "If you want me to help you, I can help you to talk to Oga, but I need all the facts." Dia's captors removed his handcuffs and leg chains and granted him an audience with Abacha. Dia and Abacha met in a room inside the presidential villa and sat next to each other on large, comfortable, sand-colored sofas, with Dia seated to the right of a relaxed Abacha who was wearing slippers. A coffee table with white cups and jugs was positioned in front of the two men. An observer who did not know either man would have been tempted to think this was a social gathering between two longtime friends. After the audiences with Al-Mustafa and Abacha, Dia and the other detainees were taken into custody and flown to Jos. The trial of 26 defendants for treason and related offenses began on February 14, 1998 at the Rukuba cantonment in Jos, Plateau State. Investigators later referred another 4 suspects for trial, thereby raising the total number of defendants to 30. Several people involved in the investigation and trial had previous coup investigation experience on one side or another. Al-Mustafa, who had a background in military intelligence, was an interrogator during the 1990 coup trials. Dunia was a member of the defense legal team during the same trials. A further little-known irony was that the defendants who were found not guilty during the 1990 coup trial were put on trial again and sentenced to death by 2 further special military tribunals. One of those tribunals was chaired by then Brigadier Tajuddin Olarenwaju. Dia had also chaired a coup tribunal that tried and jailed Major Akinloye Akinyemi in 1987. Both Olarenwaju and Dia were now defendants in the current coup trial. The defendants were given a list of 40 military lawyers from which they could choose a defense lawyer. They were permitted to choose others as long as there were 7 military officers. Malo asked the defendants whether they had objections to the tribunal's composition. Adisa and Olarenwaju expressed reservations about whether military lawyers could zealously defend them without being themselves intimidated. Malo told them, "Well, you should have said this before now. You are in the system and you have never objected to this aspect of military law." The tribunal denied Adisa's request to be defended by a civilian lawyer. Olarenwaju pleaded for time to prepare his defense and for his glasses to be given back to him so that he could read his defense documents. In view of the breathtaking revelations and the fact that the SIP had referred 4 additional defendants for trial, the tribunal was unable to complete its work before its original deadline at the end of March. It took nearly another month to finalize the trials. The head-spinning accusations, counter-accusations, and betrayals made the hearing opaque, and no one seemed to be sure exactly who had planned or said what. Who would the tribunal believe? The tribunal rendered its verdict on Tuesday, April 28, 1998. Olarenwaju pondered whether he would be condemned to die on his daughter's birthday. On their way back to Rukuba cantonment in Jos for the judgment, a number of defendants prayed and some reassured each other that they would survive the ordeal. Others claimed to have had dreams or visions of being freed. The less optimistic gave final instructions to their wives and families. Since outsiders would be readmitted to hear the verdicts, barbers trimmed the defendants' hair and shaved their beards to make them look slightly more presentable. Security teams also provided second-hand clothes to those who needed to replace their tattered garments. They were not handcuffed, but they were still led into the trial room chained to each other by their feet. The atmosphere in the trial room was of stomach-turning fear and tension. Even Malu felt the pressure. He recalled, "As I entered the room to deliver the judgment, I was overwhelmed by emotion. I was going to deliver a judgment that would forever change the fortunes, careers, and lives of my fellow comrades in arms and their families. The room was quiet, and there was immense suspense, perhaps anxiety. A sense of fear and despair infused all of the accused persons. The drama and theater of the trials had vanished. All the parties knew that the hour of judgment had come. Very soon they would learn their fate and find out if they would live or die. Things would never be the same again for most, if not all of us."
Major General A.T. Olaruwaju, Major General A.K. Adisa, Lieutenant Colonel O. Akinyode, Major O. Fadikwe, Oladisun, Corporal I. Kontagora, Corporal Edi Ebunu, Engineer A. Adebanjo, Mr. Owatimehin Abimbola, Mrs. Shola Shoele, and Professor Femi Odekunle. Lieutenant General D.O.D.A. Charge 1, treason, finding guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Major General A.T. Olaruwazi, Charge 1, treason, finding guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Major General A.K. Adisa, Charge 1, treason, guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Lieutenant Colonel O. Akinyode, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Major O. Fadikwe, Charge 1, treason, finding guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Major B.M. Mohammed, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. W. Okoka Oladisun, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Corporal Ibrahim Kontagora, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Corporal Edi Ebunu, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Engineer A. Adebanjo, Charge 1, treason, finding guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Mr. Owatimehin Abimbola, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Mrs. Shola Shoele, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty of the charge but guilty of concealment of treason. Professor Femi Odekunle, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty.
The findings of the tribunal in respect of persons charged with other offenses are as follows. Colonel E.I. Jallo, found guilty of concealment of treason and sentenced to life imprisonment. Colonel Y. Bako was found guilty of 2 out of 6 count charges. He is sentenced to 10 and 5 years imprisonment. The sentences will run concurrently. Lieutenant Colonel I.A. Yakase is found not guilty on 1 count charge of concealment of treason, but is to serve 14 years prison sentence for conspiracy to commit theft and 14 years for criminal breach of trust. Both sentences will run concurrently. Major B.M. Mohammed is to serve 2 years prison term for making false documents and 14 years for conspiracy to commit theft and another 14 years for criminal breach of trust. Sentences will run concurrently. Major A.A. Isiako is acquitted on charges of concealment of treason and theft. He is discharged and acquitted. The tribunal has also discharged and acquitted Lieutenant Commander D.A. Shoeton on a one-count charge of stealing. Mr. Mokhtar Maidabino is acquitted from the charge of theft but will serve 5 years imprisonment for receiving stolen property. Mr. Dero Maluolu is found guilty of concealment of treason and will serve life imprisonment. The tribunal discharged and acquitted DSP Bawa Machido and Mr. Ilyasu Muhammad of the charge of accessory after the fact of treason, while Mr. Ojeniyi Ademola is found guilty of stealing and is sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. Mr. Isaiah Adebowale is sentenced to life imprisonment on the one-count accessory after the fact of treason. Major General Malu says all sentences are subject to confirmation by the Provisional Ruling Council. The tribunal further ordered that all properties of any of the convicted persons which are illegally acquired or for which they could not give proper account of shall be forfeited to the federal government, while all others not found guilty of their charges are discharged and acquitted immediately.
On June 8, 1998, General Sani Abacha passed away of natural causes at the Aso Rock Presidential Villa. His death came before the Provisional Ruling Council was able to confirm the death sentences. Subsequently, the suspects were freed and granted presidential pardon.